I think the thing itself is already appalling enough that you will see why I've decided to talk about it. I sort of feel like Sri Lanka is being really. There's a lot of awfulness happening in Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh has been a bit covered by Myanmar as well, and it's not really super talked about. I mean, I understand that like creators cannot talk about everything everywhere all like at once always, but I think it might be worth to at least hint, touch on the thing that is happening, right? That it's not all good in the world outside of Ukraine and Israel Palestine. That there are a lot of horrible things happening that are just sort of quiet, that are not talked about, and by many countries they're being quietly even endorsed. All right, window capture. Oh, okay, it's perfectly on the thing that I want right off the bat. Perfect, good. Transform, fit to screen. Excellent, beautiful. Now I make myself small. Perfect. We have the setting to start talking about the thing. We are in, but I don't see the chat right now, so I'm gonna have one chat here. Sorry, I'm still all over the place because I'm still getting used to the laptop sort of to doing the laptop whole thing with the streaming. So I'm gonna go to YouTube and we're gonna jump into the thing straight away. I'm gonna be reading an article and we're gonna be commenting on how it sort of relates to the wider picture, which there is of course a wider picture. Alright. Shock and outrage in Jaffna as Sri Lankan police assault Tamil baby. I'm actually not sure how the letter J is pronounced in Sri Lanka, so I'm sort of doing my best with the reading. So I guess we're gonna jump straight into this particular story. Hold on. Sri Lankan police officers in Jaffna. I'm gonna go with this pronunciation for now. For the until I get corrected, this is the pronunciation that I'm sort of going to go with. Sri Lankan police officers in Jaffna assaulted several Tamil civilians in Chunkam. I'm not being very consistent with the pronunciation thing. Last night, including a woman and her 2-month-old baby in an incident that has sparked outrage and demands for justice amid ongoing police brutality. The incident began after a Tamil family, and this is an important part because there's been a genocide actually happening against the Tamil people. It's been ongoing for many, many years, and it's surprisingly underreported. The Sri Lanka is an extremely militarized country. I think the government, if I'm not mistaken, last time I checked, it spends close to 50% of its GDP for the purpose of militarization of its society. And basically what happened is there were two people. I'm giving you a really, really simplistic version of the history. So people that are more in depth in this might be mad at me, but basically it's been colonized. There were two people living in that area, roughly speaking. They've been smashed by the colonizing force into one country, sort of artificially, and the Tamil became sort of a minority in this sort of squashed together country, and they've been persecuted against and genocided. They've been pushed out of the territories that have been historically sort of inhabited by them, by the Tamil people, and the situation escalated, and sort of finally escalated into what we would consider a crime of genocide. That is the TLDR of the situation, historically speaking, as I understand it. I definitely should be doing a lot more reading on it, but as basically, I think I'm not being super inaccurate when I say this is basically what happened. So this is why it's important that the incident began after a Tamil family were driving in Jaffna on Saturday evening when two motorcycles crashed into their vehicle. The incident sparked an assault by the security forces and protests outside at a newly built occupation police station, with video footage and testimony from the victims capturing the flaming tensions. And this is where we get into the story. This is like the most outrageous part of the story, which I don't know. How does one even do that? I mean, of course, historically it's been a thing. The Nazis did it, of course, unsurprisingly. Many different sort of. But it's such a blatant Oh, wait, I guess I'm gonna talk about it when we get to it. I'm getting ahead of myself, and it's not good. Uh, there we go. As we were coming along the road, the two motorcycles overtook us and collided, causing them to fall, said a Tamil woman as she held her baby outside the police station in Chunakam last night. She was traveling with her sister, husband, and child at the time. Again, pretty important details to the whole thing. We stopped our vehicle as there was no fault on our part. The people who fell were drunk, and passerby said that not to worry as he was under the influence of alcohol. So the family was not responsible for the accident at all. The fault was with the people on the motorcycles who were drunk. That is also an important detail to the whole story, considering how it unfolded. As they got out of the vehicle to inspect the damage, more men started arriving at the scene. Suddenly, officers dressed in civil clothes came and asked my husband for his license. She continued, he did not provide it because only traffic officers are entitled to request it. So just people in civilian garbs, just some random, from their perspective, of course, some random guys just came up to them and were like, hey, show me your documentation. Like, of course you'd be like, wait, are you a cop? Can you, like, can you provide anything that would give you, like, the authority to ask me for my documentation? Like, it's pretty, like, it makes sense that if a random person from your perspective just comes up to you and requests for your documentation, you would basically be like, no. At that point, the men who were not uniform and had not identified themselves, so they had not identified themselves as police, began to assault the Tamil family. The woman says both she and her husband were beaten at this point. She managed to phone her brother and inform him what was happening, but as he arrived, he too was assaulted. So the situation basically right now is family in a car hit by two drunk motorbike riders. None of the fault for the accident is on their side. They came out of the car to inspect the damage. Non-uniformed cops went to them and demanded documentation, and when they refused, rightfully so, because they have not identified themselves as police, they started attacking them. And this is not a freak accident. This is not some sort of wild, out of the ordinary thing. This is part of the more systemic and systematic, for that matter, terror campaign of the government against the Tamil people. I'll say that much. The police hit him and my sister, she said. My child fell on the road, she continued, on the verge of tears. They picked my child up and threw her into the bush. So they basically, I think it will be said earlier, like later, or it was said earlier in the article that the child is 2 months old. So basically the police officers who never identified themselves as police, who were just in civilian clothing, assaulted a 2 months child, a 2 months old child. They picked my child up and threw her into the bush. As my husband tried to get in the van with our child to go to the hospital, they dropped the child and hit him with their hands. A police officer in a blue t-shirt stood in front of our vehicle with a metal pole, threatening to break it if we moved. They struck my brother repeatedly with the pole as he tried to take the child to the hospital. Like, there's no justification for this. There is no justification for attacking a family over refusing to show documentation to random people who just might be anybody. And especially there's no justification under no circumstances of assaulting a 2-month child. Unless, again, like, it is no secret that a thing that we know as a genocide in Sri Lanka has been happening, is ongoing, that there is a very deliberate campaign against people Tamil people in particular in Sri Lanka. And I think it's just not talked about at all. Like, you don't hear about it in the media. There's absolute silence about it in the media. Nobody talks about it. Nobody really talks about incidents like this. It's just complete radio silence. And I think it's not okay. I might not be a super expert on this topic, But I think this is outrageous enough to discuss on its own. Like, sure, I can do more research into this, and I probably will, but I don't think you need an in-depth understanding of the situation in Sri Lanka to know why this is extremely bad, right? I don't think you need to be an in-depth expert on the topic to understand why what happened here is just inexcusable. If we hadn't picked up our child, they would have stomped on her and killed her. An outraged crowd gathers, which, thank God, at least there's some reaction from the crowd. Because if there were no reaction from the crowd at all, that would have been the most depressing thing that I could think of. In the hours after the assault, an angry crowd had gathered outside of the police station in Chunakam. The plainclothes officers in question, in addition to beating both the woman's husband and brother, had arrested them and taken them into custody. And this will be said in a moment in the article, but they've also been refused medical aid. You know? They've been refused medical aid. Locals, including relatives and Tamil National People's Front, former parliamentarian Selvaraya Kayendran, I have to learn how to pronounce these names correctly. Thankfully, I may have a way of learning how to pronounce these things correctly for next time when I'll be covering these things. We're demanding to know why the man had been arrested and why they had not been given immediate medical treatment. Like, I guess I would add to that, why were the people assaulted? Why did, like, the procedure should be like this, in my mind. Even if the officers have no uniform, like, right? And they go to someone and like, give us your documents, identify yourselves, documents please. If the person refuses because only traffic officers can ask for documents, then you immediately pull out a badge, any sort of document, and identify yourselves as police. We're from the police, right? We're from the police, and therefore we're asking you for your documentation. It's procedure. It's part of the thing of assessing what happened here. This whole accident with the motorbikes, etc., of the car, right? That's how normally I assume it should happen. But no, the moment the person refused to give the non-uniform police people their documents, they assaulted them without identifying themselves as police, which I will repeat time and time and time again. They never identified themselves as police, they just assaulted them. In my 33 years, I have never seen such cruelty, said the woman's sister, who was also beaten herself. I thought they were thugs. They hit a 2-month-old child. They hit me on both sides of my head. This is anarchy. We are scared. We can't live. My brother's body is covered in bruises, said the woman, stating that he was beaten further after the men were taken inside the police station. Go and look inside, they gestured, pointing to the station as they stood outside. And the article continues. The newly opened police station in Chunakam is another imposing structure, one of several military and police outposts occupying the Tamil Northeast. See, occupying the Tamil, this is important because of this little historical context that is, there's this very organized effort by the government to push out Tamil people off the territory that has historically been inhabited by them. Yes, that is an important part. outpost, and of course, the Sri Lanka is an extremely militarized country. Outposts occupying the Tamil Northeast. It has been more than 15 years since the Mulivaikal genocide that ended the armed conflict, and almost 30 years since Jaffna was under complete Sri Lankan military occupation. So basically what happened there was, and again I'm giving you a very short, simplified version of historical events, actually pretty common story when it comes to genocide, that the Tamil people were oppressed. They sort of tried fighting back against their oppression, and the response to them fighting back against their oppression, against being terrorized and killed, was that the government decided to genocide them. It happened in the past. It happened with Germany, with the German Empire, and North, I believe, Western Africa. To the Herero and Nama people. That was a thing that the German Empire entered Africa, started terrorizing people, killing people, treating them as lesser, and they decided to fight back, in which situation Germany decided if they won't serve us, they will die, and decided to genocide them. That is, people don't understand often that genocide is not something that is always pre-planned, premeditated. It can be something that is emergent based on the how the situation develops. Genocide can be something that is emergent from the situation. Yet Tamil Elam, the name of the Tamil Northeast, remains one of the most militarized places in the world. Sri Lanka's security forces is bigger in total number than that of several states, including Britain, with a military to civilian ratio that is one of the highest across the globe. As I've told you, I believe they spend about 50% of their GDP towards military goals. This is an extremely militarized country, and it's also important to sort of remember that. The presence of the security forces is most acutely felt in the Tamil homeland, where the majority of Sri Lanka's troops are stationed. I wonder why. That intense militarization has brought with it an ongoing climate of impunity for continued human rights abuses. As described by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights earlier this year, torture, rape, and other abuses remain rampant amidst the ongoing violence and complete lack of accountability for it. Tamils have felt powerless, with many even looking to flee the island, and many have fled the island. I will add, many Tamil people have in fact fled their homeland because it just became unlivable for them. And you really cannot blame them for that. You really cannot blame people for fleeing in the face of genocide that the world is just looking at. The world is looking on and not really doing anything. That is the reality of the situation. The world is just looking on, and the whole topic is not even all that talked about to begin with. Like, a lot of people just don't know that it's even happening, that this sort of abuse is taking place. Which is why even if I'm just speaking to 10 people, it's basically 10 more people that know that something like this is happening. And that's not a small amount. It's certainly more than zero. I have seen you taken him inside that room, pointed another Tamil woman, as several locals confronted police officers at the barbed wire gate of the police station. We're not going anywhere. In heated exchanges in Tamil and Sinhalese, the language of Sri Lanka's police officers, even in Jaffna, locals demanded the men be taken to hospital and treated for their injuries. One officer was caught on camera repeatedly going back and forth from the station, brashly confronting the crowd of men and women that had gathered. At one point he claimed that the police were doing their duty. At another point he claims the crowd were uneducated and drunk, telling them all to go home. The drunk crowd, the drunk, uneducated crowd. Okay then. Is beating civilian was part of your duty? Shouted one man. Sinhalese are killing Tamils, exclaimed another. Who did we hit? Said the officer, who spoke in accented Tamil. Go and prove it in court. Besides him stood several Sri Lankan officers, some with their phones out taking close-up videos of the crowd barely a meter away. Out of the dozen or so officers, only one was dressed in any official uniform. Out of dozens or so officers there only one of them was dressed in any official uniform. You know? Oh, hello. Thank you for the raid. Thank you very much. We're talking about the Tamil family in Sri Lanka being assaulted by police without uniform that did not identify themselves as police. They demanded, I guess I will give you the TLDR. There was an accident, traffic accident. A Tamil family was minding its own business, going somewhere in a car. Two drunk people on a motorcycle caused an accident with them. They went out of the car to ascertain the damage to the car, and some police officers were not wearing uniforms, never identified themselves as cops, went to the family and demanded they give them their documentation, like a driver's license or whatever. And rightfully so, they said no, only traffic officers can do something like that. Only traffic officers can demand documentation from us, so you cannot do it. From the perspective of the Tamil family, those were just some random people coming to them and demanding documentation. That's what happened from their perspective. And so, upon not receiving the documentation, the reaction of the police that never, once again, I will repeat it once again, they've never identified themselves as police, assaulted the family, and most sort of shockingly, assaulted a 2-month child. Like there's no world, there's no circumstance, legal or otherwise, that would in my mind ever justify police officers assaulting a 2-month-old child. So there we go. That's the situation that happened. We were talking about an ongoing genocide happening in Sri Lanka against the Tamil people. That is basically, the world is silent about it. The world is not talking about it at all. Nobody talks about this issue. Also, by the way, if you would kindly be nice to me, I guess I should I've already introduced myself when I called in. Go to www.lucyhaze.org/live to be in the better chat, which I have no clue how to display it on my laptop setting, but I will work on it. And then you'll be able to see me live on the chat from the White Forest. I know that White Forest is not liked by everybody, but it helps me going, especially since I've had some translator fees for the interviews that I've done. So any donation or subscription on the page would be highly appreciated, because I've been doing some interviews. Polish and Ukrainian may be similar, but they're not identical, and it feels pretty disrespectful for me to conduct an interview by using Polish plus very bad Ukrainian. So I just got a translator. I got translators to help me sort of with the interviews. You know, that's just, I think that's the more respectful thing to do. To just not try to wing it with a sort of like a hodgepodge of similar, albeit different languages. Just get a translator. The Sri Lankan police initially denied they had taken anyone into custody. This is a red flag right there. They've denied arresting anybody, and they've definitely arrested members of that family, and they've beaten them at the police station. Yeah, probably a browser source, but I don't have access to that particular Google account in Ukraine, so I have to. Oh God, well, I'll figure it out somehow. We are scared they will harm my brother and husband, said the assaulted Tamil woman. This child could lose her father, and without them, we have no one. Also, the child could have been killed as well. I will reiterate it. A small child was assaulted, thrown into the bushes, hit, 2-month child. The police say they don't know what we're talking about. How can you hand over someone you don't know? How can I live tomorrow if they kill my brother and my husband? Given Sri Lanka's long history of abductions and enforced disappearances, her fears are well-founded. Over several decades, tens of thousands of Tamils have been forcibly disappeared, many last seen in Sri Lankan military or police custody, and then never heard from again. Again, this is a topic that is not talked about at all, okay? You will not find many political commentators, or I'm going to be honest, you won't find this a lot in the mainstream media either. I don't turn on the news on what's happening in the world and hear about the oppression of the Tamil people in Sri Lanka. It just does not happen. To this day, Tamil mothers continue to protest along the streets of Tamil Elam, demanding to know the whereabouts of their loved ones. We want justice. With dozens of Sri Lankan officers now outside of the police station gate, tensions rose and tempers continued to flare. Tomorrow you will be on election duty, shouted one Tamil man at the group of Sinhalese police officers who were being chauffeured back inside the station. Suddenly one of them lurched to pick up a rock. The man who was seemingly aiming it at sat on the floor, daring the officers to hit him. You are the one who threw the rock at the police, another seemingly more senior officer shouted at the Tamil man, unaware that the whole incident was being filmed. Do you think part of why we don't hear about this issue is the fact that there is no great power with an interest in backing it or exploiting the conflict? It might be part of the reason. Honestly, a lot of these conflicts that are like, I know that there's another big conflict that's not really being talked about enough, in my opinion, that's Myanmar. And that's probably because a lot of countries all around the world from all different spheres of influence simply do business with the Myanmar's oppressive junta. So you have there's a whole list of countries that just do business with the junta, enabling them to terrorize their own country in this ongoing civil war. So there might be many reasons. It might just be seen as a thing that is not worth covering, that the Tamil people are just not really worth the trouble. As you've said, there's no real perceived interest in pursuing this issue. But I have to look more into it. Yeah, I'd have to look more into it. As I said, I'm not a huge expert on this topic, so I have a lot of learning when it comes to the situation in Sri Lanka. But I will say this incident alone was so bad, and I don't think many people sort of discuss it, that I think it's just worth talking about. Right now there are 60 people in the chat, so it's like, I guess 60 more people learning that something like this is happening, which is not an insignificant amount of people learning about such a thing happening. So they started trying to accuse the civilians of throwing the rocks at the police, not knowing that they were being filmed. As more officers began marching out the station, the Tamil man's friends began pulling him back and away from the danger ahead. As he continued to shout at the officers, "Go, run away!" the officer kept repeating as the Tamil crowd hastily retreated. "We want justice," pleaded the Tamil woman to reporters outside of the police station. "My brother's body is covered in bruises. The public won't come toward as witnesses. But there is CCTV footage. We want justice." Custody for another week. On Sunday morning, the two Tamil men were marched before a Sri Lankan court. During the proceedings, we highlighted the unwarranted actions by the police force, those meant to uphold the law and protect the public, who instead acted beyond their authority, said Anne Kandepan, a lawyer for the men. Despite a political change to Anura Kumara Dissanayake, the nature of these incidents has not changed. The police force's brutality and the lawlessness persist, which is saying a lot, considering that, the police is supposed to on paper represent law and order, but lawlessness just rules when it comes to brutality against the Tamil people. As you are aware, a member of the police force in Chunakam, Officer Sigera, was previously involved in an incident where he attacked and killed a person, placing the body in a well, which led to a case against him, said Kandepan, highlighting the torturous history of Sri Lankan police brutality. No, similarly, the arrested individuals have been taken to the police station where they were brutally assaulted. The two men now remain in Sri Lankan custody for at least another week. One of them is currently receiving treatment at Jaffna Teaching Hospital, while the police officer accused of assaulting the man has himself been admitted to Telipalai Hospital. As we have filed this case against the police, it has now been handed over to the Deputy Inspector General of Police, who has instructed that the investigation continues, said Kandepan. We remain committed to clearing the name of the affected individuals. Given the climate of impunity for abuses on the island, however, it remains unclear whether justice for this case or for those before it will ever be served. And this is exactly why this needs to be talked about. This is exactly why this is such an important topic. There's a genocide happening in Sri Lanka against the Tamil people. It has its own historical roots in colonization, which we won't get into because I've given you a TLDR version earlier in the stream. And it's not being talked about like at all. It's like the topic does not exist, while it very clearly exists.